All right, let's get into this today. The Blue Zone Longevity course number 1. I'm fired up. I'm really hoping to share this with you today and make it fun, exciting, and hopefully it'll progress as quickly as possible today, so we can keep moving on here. So, just to recap, in case you haven't heard or didn't catch the first introduction to the course, this is the Blue Zone Longevity course. So, what we've done is we've broken down the blue zone that we were inspired by the film and by the book, which we're going to get into in a second. And we broke that down into a comprehensive course that breaks things or chunks things down, because this is a very big concept. It's a big idea. And so therefore we need to break things down into smaller bites so that everyone can participate and you don't have to be a big researcher or everything else to try and find it. But how can we take this blue zone with fundamental habits, foundational habits, balanced living, and purposeful living, and how do we break that down into something that we can use into our daily lives? And so this is the first number 1 course that we're doing, which is discovering the blue zone. And for anyone that doesn't know, that's me on the screen. My name is Robert Shockey. I'm the CEO and one of the founders at Qantas Life. And we're just excited about our daily lives. Like, how do we talk about it every day in our morning meetings. How do we engage people? How do we introduce new products? How do we introduce new technologies? What kind of new technologies do we have available? And how can we infuse them into our daily lives? And then also, what is our daily philosophies or our mantras? And it wasn't long ago when we started out this that I really wasn't in good shape. I was really out of shape and depressed, and it was coming out of COVID. And so a lot of those things affected me personally, and I made those changes along with a good partner and friend, Michael Carnevale, and we said, how do we do this? So I went from, being obese, basically, according to BMI, which I'm not such a big proponent for BMI, but according to BMI, even at my current weight, as you see in the third slide here, I'm obese, but I was severely obese, which I was just poor habits, poor eating habits, no exercise. I was smoking at the time. I'm a non-smoker now, but it was just really a combination of all these bad habits and just a lack of life, the zeal for life. And so I ballooned up to 265 pounds, and it was a very distressing thing to go ahead and to buy clothes that would fit me. So the stark reality is that I really didn't make big changes until I landed in the hospital. And once I landed up in the hospital, I realized this is a significant moment where I can make a decision there and then. Do I want to be alive longer for my children and my own life and live a real fulfilling life, or do I want to go to this route where I'm basically going into the system of healthcare, system care, right, and symptom care, and following that process of statins and all these other things that I could be doing, and cholesterol medications and all sorts of stuff. Do I really want to go in that route, or do I want to go into this route where I can look at, the building blocks of my functional health and how are my systems functioning and how are my systems working, and really enhancing them before it becomes a problem. And so I made those changes in December last year to December this year. And in that year, I was able to go from 265 down to just, I think I weighed in today about 221 pounds. So, but also I've changed my physiology in terms of how I feel inside, mentally and physically. And that's really important, is how to make those systemized changes. And as we look at the blue zone, we're looking at, sort of like a cheat sheet, right? How do we take these in smaller snapshots and make these cheat sheets? So if you don't have this cheat sheet for the discovery, don't worry. I'm going to put a link so that you can go ahead and get that. And so that way you can download this and keep it as a reference in your daily life. And what we really try to do is, again, simplicity is key. It seems like the most simple ideas are the ideas that resonate with people. It's the complex things where you're looking at, how does this work? And, you're looking at, you got to be a physicist or something like that. And I find that the most intelligent people in spaces sometimes are also ones that are not necessarily financially living well, but the people that created some simple idea seem to be living a very wealthy life. And I go, why is that? And I think it's because if it's simple, it's relatable, and everyone can do it. So how do we make these things simple? when you embark on a course like this, it's really like planting a seed. And we're going to get into seeds, and it's very important because it's made a big, tremendous difference in my life, which we'll talk about later on. Seeds. The mental seed, the physical seed, the seed of change. And how are we implanting that seed of change that isn't just for the turn of the new year? Because everyone at the turn of the new year says, oh, I'm going to start this new diet plan, I'm going to start this new way of thinking, and I'm waiting all the way to January 1st in order to do it. And great. I'm glad you made that decision. Sticking to it is something else. So it has to be a deep seed. Take that seed and plant it way deep in your consciousness, deep in your heart, or deep in your philosophies, that you say, you know what, I'm going to make a change, and this change is going to resonate with me, and it's going to help me for a lot longer. Now, like most people, we're busy. We're very, very busy because today, economically, you have to be busy. There's two income families. Sometimes all these families are now merging together because of economy situations and everything else. And we're all very busy, and we've got all these complications in our lives with loved ones and taking care of loved ones. And so it's and we're trying to also earn revenue. How do we sustain ourselves? So we're very, very busy. So how do we squeeze in, these things to unlock it? We're just overwhelmed, right? It's not like we can stop everything we're doing and move to a blue zone, although I really love to do that. And if you can figure out a way how to do that and not mess up the blue zone, I love to know how that's happening. But, we just can't travel to the blue zone. It's a very expensive cost proposition. And you could sit there and you could dive through all the papers, and we do. I mean, that's what we do here at Qantas, is that we look through PubMeds, and we look at WebMD, and we look at research papers, and we look up, agricultural things, and we look up, constantly content about, life and longevity and the value of turmeric, and the 800 applications to turmeric, and we look at cinnamon and all the applications of cinnamon and garlic, and how many things can be influenced in the medicine of just plants and, nutraceuticals and so forth. So we pour ourselves into it because we have a love for it. That's why we do it. But, you can also get overwhelmed by all this information. So you get all this information and you say, well, what am I going to do with all this information? How are we going to okay, great. Now I got all this information. How do I implement it? How do I focus in and then do it, right? Very difficult. How do we do that? So because you can get overwhelmed, you can get burned out, you can get even frustrated by trying to say, I want to live this lifestyle, but how? So, we have to look at basically action steps and everything, I want to go from here to there, but how do I go from here to there is by doing these small steps. So we look at action steps as a way to do that. And I'm going to share this with you now. Research the characteristics of the blue zones. Identify key factors that contribute to the longevity in the blue zones, and reflect how these can be applied in our daily life. It's very simple. These are the 3 action steps. And we're going to come right back to this at the end here, but we just want to take the first action step. So let's just lock in on that first action step, and that is research the characteristics and principles of the blue zones. So when we look at it, they're isolated areas of the world. They're really like in these little pockets. They're not, hey, I went down the street and there they were. Although that's the case in Loma Linda, which is across the way from where McDonald's started in San Bernardino, California. But very interesting. That's a topic for another time. But it usually has its own unique culture and language in those areas as well. So like in Costa Rica or Sardinia, Italy, in Greece, Icaria and Greece, they have their own regional thing. In fact, outside of that specific pocket, the longevity starts to drop off. That one specific area, it's really dense and concentrated, and then it begins to fall off. And in fact, some places like Nicola that were actually larger in blue zone actually are restricting. And that's because there's a mix of factors that are in that area. There's genetics, there's lifestyle, there's culture, there's environmental conditions that make it optimal. So we have to really look at those characteristics, right? And Because what we're trying to do is bring this into our home. How do we bring this into our lives, right? We can't necessarily say, okay, I'm going to move there. So how do we bring that into our lives? Well, we have to research those characteristics and principles, and understanding that the remarkable longevity and health in people in the blue zones, that public officials have to also look at this, right? And develop strategies to improve health, like, your own community and how they're doing it, how health professionals and coordinators in those cities are actually doing things. And so I think it's important. So we research those characteristics. How do we take a snapshot of that characteristic? I'll just read this to you. And that's implementing diet changes in a Midwestern town. So the lead researcher, Dan, decided, okay, we're going to go to the Midwest. We're going to create this culture and see if we can duplicate and replicate this. And so, inspired by the dietary habits in the blue zones, this Midwest town had high rates of obesity, heart disease, and initiated community-wide health program, right, that focused in on important aspects such as diet and plant-based diet, whole grains, reducing processed foods, and reducing meat consumption. And I'll get into that also with you a little bit. But local dietitian and health experts conducted workshops like cooking classes, which are fun, teaching residents how to prepare healthy foods, inspire meals. Restaurants and school cafeterias also adopted new menus into this blue zone mentality and philosophy. And after 1 year, the town reported significant decreases in obesity rates, notable improvement in general health indicators, and blood pressure and cholesterol levels. And some of us are struggling in those areas. I know I was. I am no longer, but I was. But in this community, they saw the increase in social engagement, which is really awesome, due to physical activity, and they gathered in cooking and dining experiences. They also broke down into small walking groups. And so people were walking together, and those relationships lasted a lot longer time. In Australia, something very similar, in a densely populated urban neighborhood, there was this loneliness and detachment occurring in this area. And they said, okay, the community leaders got together and said, how do we foster these better communications, and how do we look at mirroring the practices of blue zones and community gardens and social events and buddy systems for the elderly. And additional emphasis was placed on creating pedestrian-friendly spaces, which encouraged this social engagement. And after 2 years, what was marked improvement in mental health, reductions in reports of loneliness and depression, elderly population exhibited better cognitive and physical health, and with increased mobility and social interaction. This neighborhood also experienced strengths and sense of community with higher levels of civic engagement and support. And so as we look at this, we say, okay, what are the identifying factors that contribute to the longevity of blue zones? Let's just take action step number 2, right? But there are factors that contribute to the obstacles of doing this, right? So let's be frank about it. There are things that are holding us back. So you can't necessarily conduct in-depth research in those regions, right? You're not going to go there and evaluate all the population. As the world becomes interconnected and the blue zone regions, we're noticing that the globalization and modernization of those blue zones are also eroding the blue zones, which means, Okinawa, Japan is modernizing, and therefore some of the areas that they saw this longevity starts to retract a little bit, because now they're exposed to more modern foods and accessibility and so on and so forth. And so the decline of longevity happens. I mean, this is just facts, right? So much of the information about the blue zone practices is also like self-reported. So somebody says, hey, yes, I'm 100, but I don't have my birth certificate anymore, right? And you have to check the records. And so a lot of this is also self-reported data. So you have to also say, what is the quality of the research, right? When somebody is self-reporting versus, hey, I've been checking in every day on my meds and everything else with my doctor or physician. So some of that is self-reporting issues. So, but we got to look at the key factors that contribute to these populations, though. What is the key? And also, to helping you identify these things, and I'm gonna push a plug here for the man that inspired me, obviously, and his book, Live to 100 Secrets of the Blue Zones, and his book, Secrets for Living Longer. Now, the film is great because it encapsulates a lot of things that you can look at, but also recommend you looking at the book, Secrets for Living Longer, because it goes a little bit more in detail, gives you actual practical apps and everything else. Also, you can visit bluezones.com for more information there. But documentaries and educational videos, I mean, we pour over them, like What the Health. It's also on Netflix. You can visit there, or Eating Our Way to Destruction, or looking at, plastic bottles, looking at agriculture. There's a lot of documentaries. It's an easier way for you to learn about things in a visual medium, which I think most of us appreciate, a visual medium. But it allows you to gain insights on dietary habits and physical activities that you can participate in. Maybe things that you didn't know existed are highlighted in these films. And I suggest you take time out of your week, once a week, to go ahead and ingest some of this information and see how you can infuse this into your daily life, right? And also look at books that are written by experts. Now, Dan just didn't write one book. If you visit Amazon, he wrote several books and several cooking books and everything else. So, but they can translate scientific findings and help you understand how to adopt these long living strategies, or longer living strategies, or longevity strategies. So take a look at some of those things there. And, identifying like key factors for longevity in the blue zones is really an extrapolation of that data, that research, right? So how do we adapt and adopt some of those characteristics in our overall health and increase our lifespan in the town's population? So, when we take a look at this small coastal town in Spain, they adopted that. And local restaurants and schools and restaurants participated in the shift, and they're inspired by the close-knit connections that they saw in the blue zones, right? And they organized regular community events and encouraged social interactions. And in that small town, improved infrastructure for walking, physical activity, including creation for walking paths and community gardens, and mirroring the activities, right? And also they took an approach towards stress management. This town included yoga and meditation classes, and encouraged culture and taking time to relax and unwind. After 2 years of doing this, they reported a decrease in obesity and chronic diseases. Chronic diseases, okay? Local health clinics also recorded lower blood pressure, cholesterol levels in the population, and the surveys indicated that overall satisfaction and mental being in the residents that were connected. And this is all notable. Life expectancy was also paralleled, and people are actually living a little bit longer. Even if you could get another 1 or 2 years, that's longer living, period. I don't care. When you're on your deathbed, you're going to be saying that, can I get an extra day? I just want an extra month. I just want to tell someone I love them, right? So you want that extra time, right? Even if it's a year, by changing a couple of little habits, can we get an extra year? But, you may find it hard to adopt new dietary habits. I know it's a change, to reduce meat consumption or even eliminate meat consumption or processed foods, the things that you love so much, right? To make those changes uncomfortable. And if it's uncomfortable, that means it's working. So in many areas, where lower income, they don't have accessibility, economic barriers can also be a challenge for some. And also changing long-standing habits, such as stress, right? Increasing your physical activity. Maybe you haven't worked out before, and it's okay, get out there and just walk. But, maybe you're feeling a little introverted and you don't feel so secure in reaching out to new people and stuff like that, increasing your social engagement. This can happen too. So those are challenges, but you just need to reflect on that and get ready to make your own lifestyle shift. And there's a shift that happens either personally, and once it happens to you personally, you say, you know what, I've made this personal shift, like myself. How can I now then introduce this to other people, and how can I make a shift, and how can my community make a shift, right? So, get involved in community-based initiatives in education, look at educational programs, get involved with your community engagement, either volunteering or so on. Align with your local culture, get out there, learn about people, and maybe, people that have meat-centric, diets, maybe there's like no meat Tuesday, or, no meat Thursday, or whatever it is, change and reduce the consumption of meats. Right? Take a look at the policy and environmental changes in your local community. Maybe encourage, the farmers and collaborate with businesses to increase their availability of affordable and healthy foods, right? Get out there and maybe get involved in the planning and the physical planning of events and stuff like that. Maybe it's a church that wants to also do physical planning and like, walkathon, those kinds of things, right? And really look at work-life balances. How are you influenced at work? How many people at work are also interested in this, and how many people can you get involved? And, this is another case study where a mid-sized suburban town in Oregon also faced, rising increases in obesity, heart disease, and mental challenges. And they adopted, again, the Blue Zone principles in these specific cultures and economic contexts, right? How do we put this in? And the methodologies that they initiated educational workshops and events, and they focused on dietary changes, physical activity, stress reduction, and social engagement. So let me repeat that one more time. Dietary changes, physical activity, stress reduction, and social engagement. These are the primary drivers. These are the four primary drivers. Dietary changes, physical activity, stress reduction, and social engagement. Pretty simple, right? They formed partnerships with local supermarkets, farmer markets, community gardens, and provided more healthy foods, accessibility for people. They collaborated to create local gardens and community spaces, right, for people. And the promotion of social networks, they promoted it on social networks like Facebook to get more people out to these events. And within 2 years, they saw a remarkable decrease in obesity and obesity rates, and improvement in overall cholesterol reduction and blood pressure readings. Mental health also indicated lower stress and depression, which they can attribute that directly to the physical activity and stronger networks. And so this community cohesion improved and reported higher levels of satisfaction and engagement in these communities. This is an overall shift by just doing health focus. So let's just bring it all down. Just bring it all down here. You got to do your homework, right? Like, we can educate you here. We can make this available to you, and you can download this on our social media, and we'll send this to your email so you have a copy of this recording and everything. But you got to do it. Got to do the research. You got to do your homework. So here's the homework. Research the characteristics of the blue zones. Really revisit the materials. Get the book if you want to get the book. Download the book. Read the book. Go ahead and take a look at the film. Take a look at other films, same genre. Take a look at these documentaries. Just start educating yourself, right? Self-education. It's important. Identify the key factors that contribute to the longevity of the blue zones. Again, let's go over those 3 or 4 points that we talked about today. Let's go back over them over and over again and find out how you can make small changes in your own life. And then reflect, on your own lifestyle. Reflect. Really take a look at yourself and evaluate yourself as you are today, right? And then make sure, if you want, we'll make sure that you have this cheat sheet available so you can download it and keep referencing it. And remember, Qantas Life has products, supplements, and support for you. There's a lot of education there that we're putting out regularly. Check out our social media. We're putting out content regularly. And we have supplements that are really engaging people's lives, like transformative, right? Supporting this lifestyle change, you need to also be supplementing your regimen. So I hope that was helpful today. This is the course 1. Be sure to check out the next one, which is Dietary Decoder, where we're going to actually help you with some of your dietary restraints. I'm Rob Shockey. Thanks for watching course number 1.